Jai Hind viewers, welcome to Global I Talks. And for this session, we are honored to have Dr. Manoj with us. He's a associate professor and director of Center for Northeast Asia Studies at OP Jindal Global University. Thank you, sir, for joining us for Global I Talk. And we welcome you. We congratulate you for your promotion as well. We'll begin with the outline of the discussion that we have scheduled for today. So
Mhm.
I'll just brief our viewers about that. Yesterday we were having this talk, and this idea just popped my head that China and Japan recently released a trilateral statement with South Korea as well, and the main idea was to somehow counterbalance the economic impact that might have post 2nd April, wherein the global tariff regime would be enacted by Trump administration. So this was a scholarly discourse that I think has been going around for few days now. That the Taiwan question is pretty important for China and Japan both, and it has been pretty important. We know the nuances, the historical overview and stuff, and you will further delve into it. But how do you see the Taiwan question being at the center of China-Japan relations in the Trump administration is what we will try to focus on today. So, welcome, sir. Your first remarks on the topic, please.
Thank you to the entire team of Global Eye Intelligence for having me and giving me this opportunity. And let me say that I'm a student of Taiwan studies, and this is something that I don't claim myself as an expert because there are a lot of things to learn and study as well. So I am a constant uh, reading and studying mode on this because it's a very live study, I would say, because it's keep on changing every week or every day. It's keep changing. Coming to the question that you put forward to set this discussion of today, I think one of the biggest part would be if we go into the historical basis, more like if you look at 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki, that was signed by the Japanese and Qing Empire in China. The Taiwan big, or at that time it was called as Formosa, right?
Almost.
So Formosa, the old name of Taiwan, that got into Japan. All right, and from Japan, it stayed under as a colony for 50 years until 1945, and the surrender of Japan that happened. Following during this particular period, we did had this conversation that there was a, the Republic of China when it was established in mainland China, and it was challenged by the Mao Zedong's led communist government, not government, I would say communist forces, and nationalists ultimately like
Please.
there was a civil war between
Yes.
the two, and then followed by which um, this kind of a ceasefire to fight against the Japanese. And once they fought off the Japanese and the Japanese surrendered in 1945, they restarted this civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And due to which the nationalists, of course, backed by the US and other forces in the region, and the communists were backed by the Soviet, and largely they fought by themselves. And the nationalists, seeing that they militarily they are getting defeated, they moved the leader, Chiang Kai-shek, moved to Taipei along with his more than a million of his followers, and so do it. The process began and led to which in 1949 the PRC was established in mainland China, and but the ROC was established long back in 1911-12 around that such. Where does Taiwan belong post-Japanese surrender? If we look at Cairo Declaration of 1943, if you see in Cairo Declaration, it is clearly, I put down the notes, it is clearly mentioned that Taiwan to be returned to the Republic of China. It didn't mention, because at that time there was only Republic of China.
Yes.
1943, there was no PRC, and Republic of China, and followed by which, when the Potsdam Proclamation happened in 1945, the Article 8 of Potsdam Proclamation says that Cairo Declaration should be carried out. Though, so if we go back 2 years, the Cairo Declaration, which says that Taiwan should go to ROC. Now, coming to the contemporary or the post 1949 phase, when the ROC, so one can say that Taiwan has gone to ROC, but because ROC is still existing, it is still under ROC. But of course, with the time, a lot of things have changed. Taiwan, which was completely under ROC, became democratic. It was under martial law for the longest in the world, and then it became democracy. That it's a thriving democracy right now, and the situation in the mainland and Taiwan have changed since then. Now it is more about being seen as a non-domestic conflict, but more like an internationalization of this conflict has happened. So thing which was a civil war, it has gone. It's now it seems like more like an international conflict. So that's the kind of a brief history of what's happening till today.
So, you touched upon Chiang Kai-shek. He is a very important person in this entire story because he was like the supreme commander of all allied forces in this part of the world,
Yes.
in this theater. So when he was representing the Chinese at the Cairo conference, there was this trilateral agreement between US, UK, and China, which was the ROC, as you just said, that Formosa would come back to China post-war, and this was again carried out in the Potsdam conference. But as we see that he fled to Taiwan, and then we saw that the Western countries were very quick on, not accepting Mao Zedong-led PRC's establishment for few years. Uh, we saw there was a first Taiwan Strait crisis in 1958, which you know, which concretized this idea in Mao Zedong and his inner circle that China has to have a nuclear bomb if it has to deter the Western powers and take back Taiwan, which is why they developed it in 1964. Then there was another Taiwan Strait crisis and yet another Taiwan Strait crisis in 1990s, 1996, 1997. So there were three Taiwan Strait crises. My question with regard to this is what is stopping the scholarly or the intellectual community to frame this as the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis of the events that have been happening since August 2022 when Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan, and we have seen that China has ramped up military exercises and it is psychological coercion around Taiwan. They are trying different tactics, they are deploying different resources, they are trying to squeeze Taiwan, they are trying to block Taiwan, and they are trying to uh, preempt the strategies that the Americans might have in order to, keep the Taiwan Strait open in case of a crisis. So, what is stopping the international community or the intellectual community from terming this as the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis?
Um, you're absolutely correct. It's not everyone is um agreeing to the term this Nancy Pelosi incident as the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis. But yes, there is a larger section of the intellectual community, or you say the public, claiming it to be the fourth Taiwan Strait crisis, followed the starting from 1958, 58, 55, 58, 1995, and now this 2022. And if you see, immediately after 2022, this is the third white paper that came out by the Chinese related to Taiwan, right? So this is a significant part of, say, event that occurred in the cross-strait relations. But the stopping to call it as a Taiwan Strait, if you see in the past, the world was less integrated with mainland China
Hmm.
to as compared to right now. And now it is the manufacturing base of the world. Of course, it is the, if you see, pick any country around the world, out of 10, at least 5 or 6 countries, more than 50% of them have the largest trading partner is China, either by import or by export, right? Or as a group, let's say EU, ASEAN or so. Japan have huge investments in China, South Korea, huge investments, including Taiwan, have huge investments in things. And if you see the diplomatic notes, like when the Japan-China relationship was normalized between the PRC and Japan in 1972, Uh, it is that the Japanese, if you go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan, it states that Japan fully understands and fully respects its stand. Its stand means the PRC stand, and firmly maintain Article 8 of the Potsdam Declaration over the claim of the PRC over Taiwan, right? So there is, and if you see Canada or any other US, also you find different terminologies like US acknowledges or US takes note of China's PRC's claim over Taiwan
Hmm.
also. So it's not saying that it's they accept it. It's more about acknowledging the fact that yes, there is a claim, but not saying stopping themselves from saying that PRC has a control over Taiwan. So those all the strategic ambiguity, as they call it, this not so very clearly mentioned of what's going to happen. So that has created the confusion, and it will stay unless and until the countries fully and clearly mention this. And this confusion will always be there uh, of what's going to happen, what is the legal status, and all those aspects behind it.
So you mentioned that China is the largest trading partner. It takes me back to a fact that US is the largest security provider to around 120 countries in the world, and based on this security, China is the largest trading partner for 130 countries. So both are very much integrated, and that is why we have seen successive administrations quoting up to China. Even recently, the Biden administration, they did not talk about decoupling; they talked about de-risking the relationship. So it's very obvious that both understand the interdependence, and that it is extremely difficult to negate this entire interdependence that they have built over last 20 years, primarily from 1978, but more so since China's inclusion in the WTO. You also mentioned about the strategic ambiguity, and it's basically that actually took me to another question. How do you see one China principle and one China policy? Because that is like the foundational aspect of the strategic ambiguity.
Yes, absolutely. See, there is see, policy can be changed, right? Principles cannot be changed. If you see the most of the statements that comes out from PRC, it is more about one China principle. But when it
Hmm.
comes to other countries, they usually say one China policy, right? So things will be there again, the narrative, and it comes down to again, if you see at 1992, the one China principle as claim or one China policy that was kind of signed by the mainland Chinese and the ROC government, or the Taiwan government, as you can say now, is that yes, they both agree that there is one China, but there is a different interpretation of what is China. Okay. It's very confusing, and even me personally, I still need to read again and again to make myself clear that these are two different things, and it's again, it's no lack of clearance. Each side have their own interpretation of what is China, who controls China, and is if we see at the current stage, there is no doubt that PRC is the have the sole control over the entire mainland China, and ROC or slash Taiwan has the sole control over Taiwan and its adjoining islands, right?
Mhm.
So those confusion will always be there. Again, coming back, I'll use the same term, strategic ambiguity, or there is a not so uh, clear to the point statements. Each one have their own claims. So that's why the confusion is there.
The Chinese are pretty good when it comes to playing with diplomatic words, because they leave this strategic ambiguity owing to their own language. They play this in the translation game.
Yes, yes, yes. Like these are the things. Whether you so that's why there is a different study completely is called diplomatic language studies, right? So where you can accept it, whether you cannot accept it. Diplomacy is more about agreeing to not agreeing
Yes.
things. So that's why the confusion is there. Yes.
And with regards to the islands that you talked about, so Chiang Kai-shek when he was ruling ROC, and ROC was formed after the Xinhai Revolution of 1911, wherein they removed the empires and the dynasty, the last dynasty, Qing dynasty, which was like the all the dynasties combined were 2000, 3000 years old. So they removed the dynasties, they overthrew them.
Yes.
Then they established ROC. This ROC was the initial propagator of something called as 11 dash line.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was adopted by PRC. It became 9 dash line. Then now it has been again reasserted by the Chinese recently in another set of cartographic aggression as 10 dash line.
Yes.
Yeah. So this brings us back to the allies that Taiwan is banking upon in its vicinity. Just in case if it faces aggression from the Chinese. There are only two very proximate allies, which is the Philippines and Japan. But we know that the Philippines also has an issue, a lot of issues, with the Coast Guard, and it has been very prevalent in that area in the South China Sea as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese are trying to cut off the access in the Bashi Channel for the Philippines so that they cannot come and save Taiwan. How do you see these lines, the 9 dash line or 10 dash line or 11 dash line?
See, in a larger sense, ROC still have the claim, like not say like officially, they still also have the claim over our northeast, the Arunachal Pradesh as southern Tibet and all, which the PRC inherited. And this is again the 11 dash line, 9 dash line, 10 dash line, or any such lines was also again inherited by the PRCs from the ROC's claim. Until today, there are, of course, 7 to 8 countries which have claim over South China Sea at different areas, right? And Taiwan has their own Paracel Islands, Spratly Islands claim, and all over these places. And this will be there, but again, Taiwan don't have allies by the countries that you mentioned of Philippines and Japan. They're more like a friends
But
rather than
but
because allies can be only when there are two diplomatic relations, because lack of it. And you see the northernmost point of Philippines, the Luzon Island, the Cagayan province. It's about 80 miles, if I'm not wrong, from the southernmost tip of Taiwan,
um,
right? And strategically, US also have two bases, not bases, they call it EDCA sites, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement military sites,
yes.
as claimed, right? So that's there. And coming back to 2022 August incident
Yes.
during Nancy Pelosi, some of the missiles fired by the PRC also landed in the Japanese exclusive economic zone. That will definitely bring these countries together. But putting it through to the South China Sea, I would say there will, unless and until there is a joint um, patrolling, joint freedom of navigation movement, freedom of open navigation happens in South China Sea, I would say PRC will prevail because, of course, given its larger power, military power, the blue water navy that it has, as compared to other countries in the region, unless until, let's say, US or any other major power comes into this place. Coming to South China, to other Southeast Asian countries, if you see, more than 500,000 of Southeast Asian citizens live in Taiwan,
Hmm.
as in terms of, let's say, as a healthcare providers, as a workers in different industries, right? So their involvement in case there is a conflict happens, including the offshore islands of Chinmen, Matsu, Pongu, you'll find a lot of the Southeast Asian workers living around. So there have been a lot of times where there is a attempt by the PRC to come across to say that, okay, what will happen? And like the PRC ambassador to the Philippines in 2022, if I'm not wrong, in one of the event, he said that what will happen to those overseas Filipino workers, as they said, in Taiwan if there is a conflict. So there is a
Hmm.
kind of signaling. And again, the more the Chinese have tried to use other countries against Taiwan, the more internationalization of this conflict has happened. So it
Hmm.
acts against them if they kind of keep on putting other countries' name into this cross-strait conflict. But it works more in favor of the ROC or the Taiwan rather than in the favor of PRC when it comes to the other countries or internationalization of the conflict.
Sir, you mentioned about the missiles landing in the Japanese water, exclusive economic zone. So we have seen this time and again, and more so emphasized by a gentleman named Shinzo Abe, and he was the proponent of Quad, as we know the structure. It's not a military alliance, but a military structure that is meant to keep the oceans open, basically. So he was of the opinion that a Taiwanese emergency is a Japanese emergency, and he was a strong believer of this thing. So how do you see this?
Mr. Abe, who was the former Prime Minister of Japan, was rightly into this fact that Taiwanese emergency is Japanese emergency. And if you see, I'll just tell you on a sociological basis, there are more than 100,000, like more than 1 lakh Taiwanese traveled to Japan and Japanese traveled to Taiwan. There is a huge uh, interaction between the public, the citizens of the two sides. Right?
Cultural exchange.
There are, like, I know a lot of people in Taiwan or who live in Taipei also. They, on a Friday evening, they take a late night flight, fly to Japan because the distance is so close, have the weekend there, and fly back to Taipei on Sunday evening. And I was amazed by the kind of closeness that these two countries share, even though Japan was the colonizer. And yes, because if you see Japan, Taiwan, or the Okinawa and all this comes into the first island chain of, as some scholars said, like, so that's where this kind of statement that came out. It's important for Japanese security because Okinawa, because as we know, there is de- say, even there is a debate about between Japan and China as well, who owns Senkaku slash Tiao
Yeah.
Islands, right? That also occurred in 2012. And if you see the pattern of the PRC's claim over Senkaku Tiao or its PRC's increasing actions against Taiwan since 2012, you will find more or less the same patterns. I have done it's a paper under I'm under writing right now. You'll see like it's the same pattern of behavior by the PRC military forces. And if you see the Japanese Defense Blue Book, also in 2020, if I'm not wrong, they had Taiwan marked Taiwan as part of PRC, but in 2021 Defense Blue Book, the Taiwan is not marked as the part of PRC. So these are some of the signalings that the countries don't say, but
Mhm.
this by the actions it can do it. And given Mr. Abe, who was quite prominent into this, but his unfortunate demise has kind of put a break. But if you see over the years, and even recently, the G7 countries and Quad countries are coming out regular statements that the peace and tranquility and the maintenance of status quo of the cross-strait is very much important for the region. And but Japan can't ignore PRC as well
Mm.
because they need PRC to have leverage over North Korea and its North Korea's own missile incidents.
That is a very comprehensive answer because if you consider the first island chain theory, you are automatically shifted to the entire Pacific security architecture.
Yep.
And that is why China keeps saying that Taiwan is a core of China's core interest. Uh, I, for me, like this is my personal opinion, and I would like you to pitch in into this. I think more than the chips or the economic aspect of Taiwan, my personal understanding is that a territorial integrity is very important for PRC because it relies on the ancient Chinese statecraft kind of thinking that a territory needs to keep growing like an organism to stay relevant. So territorial integrity, and since Taiwan sits at the heart of the first island chain, so it is like the core of core interest. But do you think there are more political, economic, security, or technological factors that drive this core of core interest narrative?
Yes, there are definitely. given Taiwan's very good infrastructure, and I can say I lived there for 7 years, so I know it's infrastructure-wise they're massive and really good, and this will definitely help if the PRC comes over. Its own Taiwan's own say the strong points such as its geography. If you see, 80% is mountainous, and it's very good to defense, or it's easier for the PRC if they have Taiwan as a base to go launch more say actions against Philippines in the south, or towards Japan in the north, or towards east towards Hawaii and other Pacific islands, which are largely under the influence of Australia and US, right? The Pearl Harbor, and this comes to the second island chain. So it's very important for this. Yes, the core is there, but it's more about serving to the audience of the PRC in the domestic audience rather than saying it for targeting towards the foreign audience. And if you see, there are a lot, largely there are recently there are a lot of news articles by the Xinhua, the China state controlled medias, media houses, or I would not say China state controlled, but it's China state affiliated media houses like Xinhua and CCTV and so on. So more and more articles coming out related to Taiwan. But at the same time, Taiwan the original the party KMT, the Nationalist Kuomintang Party, has been trying to mitigate these domestic factors of DPP being considered as a very pro-independence, whereas the KMT is considered as pro-China. But it's more like a very top of the iceberg point of view, I would say. But when we go more in depth of domestic politics of Taiwan, things changes, and each one have their own views. And within KMT, there are multiple views of how the relationship with China should occur, or within DPP in Taiwan, there are multiple views again how the relationship should go on. So the core interest will be there, and then it's not going to go anywhere by the PRC. But we may need to see, instead of saying the core, they may try to use some other term in few more years.
Sir, you touched upon a very important fact, which is the domestic politics and why it is important. If we look at the Kashmir issue, it is in India's interest that it remains a bilateral issue,
Mhm.
whereas it is in Pakistan's interest that it becomes an internationalized issue, which is why it keeps on doing that. Same is the case with this issue as well. China wants it to be a bilateral kind of an issue wherein they can have an understanding with the KMT and keep the KMT in power. And ultimately, this is what I have been following, that the Chinese end game for a bloodless war would be to have a pro-China party in power in Taiwan, which can conduct a referendum to bring back the territory back to the mainland, which is what the Chinese want, whereas the Taiwanese want to internationalize it, or they want international organizations to come and recognize Taiwan as a sovereign territory. How do you envision international organizations play a role in this?
Okay, thank you for bringing this out. But my biggest fear is not fear, I would say. I don't think Kashmir issue and Taiwan issue are similar. They're
No,
quite
no,
two,
no.
like it's quite different. I understand the point where you can
Analogy.
looking at, and also
Mhm.
like people try to compare Ukraine issue with Taiwan issue,
Mhm.
or Afghanistan. What happened to Afghanistan will happen the same to Taiwan. So each one have their own ways of doing it, and yes, it lies at the interest of Taiwan if it gets internationalized. But I would say the like international organizations, for example, let's take the very recent example like WHO, World
Mhm.
Health Organization. Taiwan was considered for its World Health Assembly. Taiwan was considered as an observer status first, but right after COVID-19, earlier which was known as Wuhan virus, right? It got renamed to COVID-19, and then Taiwan was booted out from the WHA, World Health Assembly. Then comes the Air Traffic Regulator, ICAO. It got
Mhm.
booted out, and you might have seen and that. lot of tour companies and airlines were also dictated by the PRC to put, whenever you type Taipei, it has to be Taipei, comma China, Taipei, comma Taiwan, comma China, to act on the line, or they will lose business with China, right? So these things will be there, but again, Taiwan needs to internationalize its voice through, of course, it has only 12 diplomatic allies, but it has tried to use a lot of non-diplomatic efforts, such as there's something called hashtag revolution, or say using like Taiwanese Hindi Bhai Bhai, hashtag Military Alliance, hashtag Taiwan Can Help, hashtag Taiwan Matters, and like this kind of viewpoints have been used multiple times and multiple places.
I was having a talk with a Chinese security oriented person, and he brought out a very interesting point to me. He said, today, if you look at Ukraine, the Russians are fighting Russians in Ukraine. Because if they talk about the civilizational sphere of influence, and the Chinese do think in those terms, that this is our sphere of influence and stuff. So they think that the Russians are fighting the Russians in Ukraine because the great empire of the Soviet Union broke up territorially. Uh, so they fear, this is a big fear that the Communist Party has, that the Chinese will end up fighting the Chinese if we don't stay together as a single entity, and the external powers will keep fueling the conflicts, which was what they have seen in what they call the century of humiliation
Mhm.
for 100 years. But again, like, that has gone, and it has been 100 years, and it will be 100 years to the formation of PLA in 2027, which is when a lot of international experts think that Xi Jinping has ordered PLA to be combat ready to take over China by 2027. What are your views on this, sir?
Okay, I think as a national army like PLA, they need to be combat ready, irrespective whether with Taiwan, with India, with US. It's their duty. That's why PLA exists, right? They need to be combat ready. So such statements do not matter. I think the same with to any government military. Like it's they need to be combat ready to be at the action. And given the will to like the will to fight against Taiwanese, maybe may not be, and the same against goes with it, goes both hand to hand, whether they are going to fight militarily, or they are going to do any digital attack, like that has been going on, cyber attacks. Of course, there's no claim of it, or you might have seen the reports of balloons flying over
Yes.
Taiwan, or the drones flying around the military bases of controlled under by the ROC forces, right? So these things will always be there. And if you see the Chinese news articles, it's usually say that Taiwanese compatriots. So they try to assimilate in many ways to Taiwanese citizens to think that they are part of China. For example, they used to have a separate ID which looked different for Taiwanese citizens when they entered mainland China. But that changed to a uniformity of ID, of ID number, how it is going to be there is certificate saying that okay, this is your compatriot card,
Hmm.
right? They have, I know a lot of my friends from Taiwan who have visited Taiwan, mainland China, in let's say as a study tour, which is completely sponsored by different organizations backed by the government in mainland China during summer break, so that they can reconnect with their roots. That's the Beijing always try to put forward.
Hmm.
Like offshore islands like Chinmen, there it's an island, so there are some certain water issues where the Chinmen councillor or the governor said that we need to have they are willing to import water from mainland China, because it's much closer. The China's mainland China is much closer from Chinmen rather than to Taipei.
Hmm.
And let's say having a bridge between mainland China and Chinmen Islands, and so, right? So all these different ways of integrations it not necessarily to be a military tactic, but again also in terms of digital or psychological. And if you see, if you remember, in 2022, 2021, there was a news channel in Taiwan which all of a sudden flashed out news saying that Taiwan has attacked, Taiwan has attacked.
Mm,
So Taiwan has been attacked. The national emergency has been declared, but it turns out to be it was a mistake. But the news stayed for a couple of time during breakfast hours of Taipei, and it created much panic. And so these are the things that creates a lot of friction within the society of Taiwan. And if you see, there was a recent article by South China Morning Post as well that, according to a survey that has been done in Taiwan, about 55 or 66% of males of Taiwan don't want to fight if there is going to be a war. But there is another viewpoint that yes, they are willing to fight. That's a think tank in based in Taiwan who has conducted the survey, INDSR, in terms of how you ask them. So again, all those things matters a lot. And given Taiwan's low birth rate now, and maybe situation will be very complex in 20 years from now, that they may not have enough people to fight uh, unless until they do some innovative ideas. So that suffer Taiwan is going to uh, say have a lot of trouble because of low birth and no people to fight, not enough people to fight. I have seen this, especially not in military, but in terms of education sector. Some of the schools I have visited in Taiwan have had only like 5 students from class 1 to class 6. So most of these schools are being integrated with other bigger schools in the locality, or the university's programs are being closed down, or the buildings are being converted into old age homes and community centers. So, and in the cities, it's much better. The situation is much better. But in earlier, the class size, the teachers used to say the class size used to be 40, 45. It moved to 30, 35. Now the class sizes are 25 to 30 or 20 to 25 in most of the cases. So all these factors a lot when it comes to if strong fight against the PRC if there is going to be a war.
that brings me to a narrative, I would say, that this war, if this war is to occur, it will be a technological war, not
Yes,
uh,
definitely,
it,
definitely. It's the beginning. It will be a technological war.
yeah. So there will be they've experimented swarm of drone strategy and stuff.
Yes, yes, yes,
Build radars that can detect
yes.
thousands of them and build lasers that can eliminate hundreds and thousands of them. But at the end of the day, I was at the Rising Dialogue and I was listening to a panel which had David Petraeus, the former CIA chief and CENTCOM director, and our own CDS as well. And both of them emphasized on one single factor, that no matter how much technologically advanced your army is, manpower cannot be substituted. And it is
Yes,
still the most important thing in,
exactly.
yeah. So if you uh, if as the data that you cited, if that is the opinion of males in the Taiwanese society that they don't want to fight, it's a psychological victory for Beijing, that the coercion tactics will someday yield results on diplomatic and political fronts without having to fight a military war.
Exactly. And if you see the surveys that has been conducted, about many people don't want the highest number of percentage, about 33 or 34% of the Taiwanese citizens don't want any war. They want the status quo to be maintained. The reason being, without just being the status quo, they are still acting as an independent country. They have their own army, they have their own specified geography, they have their own money, they have their own passport, which any independent country is, and their Taiwanese passport is also one of the strongest in the world. So they do have a lot of as the status quo is the best for Taiwan as of now. Like I said, within different political parties, there are multiple views of how they see the cross-strait relations as such. as a cultural or as a military or as a family. Uh, so each one has their own views, and it's quite interesting to study this, please.
Uh, it Thank you for your insights. It was pretty wonderful. I think we have touched upon everything. But like it's a big topic. Like a lot of things are still left. But as we do with other experts that we host at Global I Talk, before we wrap up, instead of the concluding remarks, we try to talk a simulation wherein we try to gauge what the expert actually feels about a certain kind of scenario. So this is a scenario. The Taiwan Strait is the scenario. How do you think this will pan out in the coming future? And will there be a militarization in, let's say, Yellow Sea, East China Sea, or South China Sea? More militarization?
Yes,
Just
definitely.
because of the,
It's already militarized.
yeah.
It's going to be more militarized, and Japan itself is also revamping its entire military, with Trump right now in power in the from the US. So we never know because see, in my experience, I don't consider what is going to happen, but it's more about what is happening and what it may lead to, right? So militarization, as you said, it will be definitely will be there. The rise of AI will play a huge part, and I would highly recommend to anyone who is listening to this to please check on YouTube the something called Zero Day. It's a small short drama that is launched by the Taiwan, which shows how the China is going to um, attack Taiwan and what and how it will going to use it's Taiwan's own domestic angle into for its own gain. So I highly recommend that Zero Day. I will send you the link for you to have a look. It shows a lot of things of what is going to happen. And outside of Taiwan, geographically, yes, it's a big sea. Even though geographically it's looks small, East China Sea, South China Sea, Pacific, it's a huge playground for the world powers, including the regional powers. And anything can happen, and miscalculation can lead to an anything. Like for example, at once Taiwanese soldier mistakenly fired two missiles toward mainland China, or mistakenly if the Chinese fighter jets come very close to the Taiwanese fighter crafts or civilian population, it may lead to something else. So we never know. I hope it never happens, but we never know what is going to prevail. Mm.
uh, the Chinese are ramping up military exercises around Taiwan, and it is very patient of Taiwan to, not react. But if Taiwan accidentally reacts, it can lead to more destructive things.
Yes, it's again not also not about reacting. See, most of these tactics are also the PRC, the PLA Air Force that are coming, or the Navy that is coming very close. It has been considered that these are mostly done by the young pilots. The PRC knowingly send them to gain practice of what is going to happen. There was a study that most of the PRC tactics are first implemented against Taiwan and to see how Taiwan is reacting, and then they use the same thing across other countries. So things can go here, things can go there, but again, if you see, USA has also reduced its freedom of open navigation in the South China Sea as compared to 2 years or 3 years back. During Trump times, might increase, but more about, I would say, Japan or Philippines, not Philippines probably, but Japan doing more of this freedom of open navigation around Taiwan rather than USA. USA will do, it will not stop, but it will do. But given how Trump is, Mr. President Trump is, it's unpredictable
They
again.
have decreased the transit through Taiwan Strait
Yes,
along different allies.
yes,
Uh, and I will definitely, have a look at Zero Day because
yes, I will send you the link very soon.
it seems very intriguing and perfect for a Sunday afternoon.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time, your insights, and it was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sumit.
We touched upon a lot of points, and we look forward to hosting you again for more discussion, not just specific to Taiwan, but the entire Northeast Asian region, including one of the most interesting topics, which is Korea and nuclearization, or as someone say, denuclearization. So we
Definitely,
look
definitely.
forward to hosting you for that as well in the future. So
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sumit.
thank you, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.